Okay.
Do I have to comb my hair?
What's that?
Do I have to comb my hair, put on stage makeup?
No, we don't have the crew here tonight.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let me start with saying I'm here today on March 7, 2017, interviewing Betty Kelton, a longtime South Brunswick resident. I have a series of questions here, and we can expand on these, or you don't have to answer everything. We can just play it by ear, okay? These are suggestions. The heading that I first have is home life. Where and when were you born?
I was actually born at Middlesex Hospital in New Brunswick. I gave my mother a very difficult time, so the doctor had to do a cesarean for her in the hospital.
Okay.
I was brought up in Kingston. Now, my parents may have lived someplace earlier when I was first born. That, I was a baby. I don't know.
So Kingston, as far as you know.
As far as I know, Kingston.
Okay, all right.
I lived on the corner of Academy and Basin Street.
So how far off of Main Street is that?
The light where the current post office is Academy Street.
Okay.
On 27. And going down, about 2-3 blocks, there's one side street that comes in. It's a cross street that you cross. Then there's another street that just comes in from the left, and that goes down the hill to connect with Ridge Road.
Okay.
But I don't remember the names of the streets.
So not too far from the center.
They're not too far.
Okay. All right.
2 long blocks, 3 long blocks.
Okay. Can you describe your family growing up?
My dad was a mechanic. He worked for the garage there, Stewart's Garage, and I think it's still owned by the Stewart family.
Wow.
It's now Princeton Garage, I think they call it now.
Okay.
But at that time, it was Ben Stewart's Garage. And he worked there along with his name was George Lewis. He worked with another George Luck. And you know the Luck family.
Yeah, I've heard that name, yes.
They have been in Kingston forever.
Yeah. Yep, I know that name.
So he worked as a mechanic. Mom was a housewife.
Okay. Okay. So where were your parents born, or why did they choose to move to South Brunswick if they weren't from South Brunswick?
My dad was brought up in South Brunswick.
Okay, so he was from here.
And my mom, well, fell in love, got married, and that's where they wound up.
So they were.
My mom was from Middlebush in Somerset County.
Okay,
Franklin Township.
So pretty close, pretty local.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Do you have any contact with your relatives? Are you in contact with them? Cousins?
I've got a million relatives.
Yeah.
Some of them very close, some of them not so much.
Are some of them local?
There's a lot that live in Princeton. There's some more distant cousins, I think, that still live in the Kingston area. My grandparents, my dad's parents, lived on 27, and right where the Trap Rock Road comes out.
Yeah. Yep.
They lived there.
Okay.
In the house right next to where the Trap Rock Road comes out.
Okay. Sure. So that's going towards the west.
Yeah.
Westerly direction. Well, I have on here what languages did you speak in your house? I mean, I'm assuming it's English. Yeah, well. Do you know any stories from the old days, from when you were growing up? What were some of the stories that were told, and the family stories, interesting family stories, or...
Not that I can remember any family stories.
No.
My grandparents didn't talk that much about anything.
Uh-huh.
And in fact, as I was growing up trying to get information from them about their parents and grandparents, it was like, what do you want to know that for?
Yeah, I'm familiar with
I've
that.
been able to dig out a lot of family tree. Well, one of my cousins has done a lot of the dirty work, done most of the work, but between him working very hard and me looking over his shoulder and saying, nah, that's not what I remember, we've been able to track the family tree back to 1805.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
pretty
Yeah, that is impressive. Wow.
It goes all the way back to a man, as they called him, Harry the Slave. He must have been born in about 1805 because someone came across his manumission papers, and at that particular time, I think a male had to be at least 25 before they were freed.
So that's what the manumission papers are.
Right,
Yeah.
his freedom.
Okay.
And that they've tracked at 1830. So that's how we come up with his birth date. He married, had a bunch of kids. One of them married again, had a bunch of kids. So you go down. See, he was Harry the Slave. His name became Harry Salter. Henry Salter, rather. He had a son called Henry Salter. That Henry had a bunch of kids, and one of them was Mary Eveline Salter, and that was my grandmother.
Okay, Salters.
So, and my grandmother was one of about 14 kids, if I remember correctly.
Wow, big family.
So they crisscross married into a whole bunch of other families. So I always laugh and say anyone who's been in this area more than 2 or 3 generations is probably a cousin of mine. So when you ask about do I keep in touch with my cousins, there's too many of them.
Describe the household that you grew up in. What was it like there?
The house when we lived in it was a 2-family house.
Okay. So it's like a duplex.
And now it's a 1-family house.
Okay.
But at that time it was a 2-family house. We lived in the front half, and there was an older, I think they were German or Jewish, I'm not sure which, who lived in the back half of the house. And this was before the days of indoor plumbing, so we had an outhouse.
That was my next question. I know you have electricity. I don't have to ask that question.
Yeah.
But the other question was indoor plumbing.
No.
So you had an outhouse.
We had running water,
Okay.
but no indoor plumbing.
So when it was wintertime, you had to go out in the cold.
Right.
Did the children have their own rooms? Did you all have your
I
own?
had I was an only child,
Okay.
so I had my own room.
Okay, so that was probably relatively uncommon in that day to have your own room.
Probably, I can't say for anybody else,
Mm-hmm.
but I had my own room. My cousins that I knew, if they shared a room, it was either with one brother or one sister. There was always enough room.
Okay.
I mean, we were never all squeezed into a one-bedroom house. There was always enough room.
Because you hear the stories a lot where everyone was in one room.
No.
So you didn't have that.
No.
Well, how was your house heated? I mean, back
You know, I knew you were going to ask that question.
coal or oil or...
And I honestly don't remember.
Oh, that's okay.
There was a furnace in the middle of the floor, and I assumed that it was an oil furnace,
Mm-hmm.
but I really don't remember. I mean, there was no coal coming up, but I think it was an oil furnace. You know,
Yeah, well, coal, it's very messy in the basement because they
Yeah.
have to have so you would probably know if it was coal.
No.
Because oil is just a tank, right?
oil, and I think it was one of those where there was a tank on the back of the furnace.
Uh-huh.
It is.
So you can have a tank in the basement. Yeah.
No, I think I think the tank was like on the back of the furnace.
Okay.
I honestly don't remember.
Okay. Okay.
Remember, I was only a kid.
Now, the next question, I know what kind of lighting you had in your house. You had electric lights.
Oh,
in your
yeah,
house.
we had and we had a telephone.
Okay. So,
Party line back then.
You know, I remember a party line. I had a party line growing up, and my mom used to yell at me to get off the line. So I had experience with party lines.
Yeah.
So did your family have a garden to supplement, or?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And what kind of things? Just
Vegetables.
vegetables. No animals. No chickens.
No. Mom had a vegetable garden because Mom, she had green thumbs. She could grow anything. And of course, back then there was no such thing as a freezer to freeze food, but you canned anything that stood still. So there was always canned vegetables and
What about an ice box?
literally.
Yeah.
I mean, the Iceman came and brought in ice.
With the tongs and delivered.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah.
What was your favorite meal as a child, if you remember, or did you have one?
Don't remember really.
No.
Probably ice cream, probably strawberries, because I love strawberries.
That sounds good. Did your family go on vacations, and where did they go, if so?
Vacation would have been going to visit relatives.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember we had relatives in New York State, we had relatives in Virginia, and we would go up to Poughkeepsie, New York, and Stanfordville, New York. Found out later that the family that we visited up in Stanfordville was my mother's brother. And I found out recently that house was a stop on the Underground Railroad.
And this is in New York?
In New York,
Oh,
in
okay.
Stanfordville.
Okay.
In Stanfordville. That's outside of Poughkeepsie.
Wow. That's interesting. Well, what role did religion play in your childhood and in life?
Strongly Methodist.
Methodist. And could you tell us a little about your friends from the neighborhood? Do you remember who you hung around with back then?
My best friend back then was a gal named Betty Underwood. She lived halfway between where I lived and and Route 27.
Okay.
And the only thing that was funny was that she had a Great Dane dog, not a Great Dane, a German Shepherd. And the German Shepherd was told to take care of Betty. Well, he took care of both of us. The dog figured Betty was Betty, and if anybody came anywhere near either one of them, it was a grr.
So you had protection.
We had protection.
That's great.
There was Betty Underwood. There was Irving Potts, a Billy Bubeck, Rita and Evelyn Taglioni. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong, or remembering it wrong. Tag is something another. And those are the ones that I remember playing with most of the time.
Okay. Pretty good list there. Well, I know the roads were paved, but sometimes, back in the day, they weren't paved the same way. But I was just wondering, what did Route 1 look like as far as how many lanes it had, or George's Road, places like that? Did they look much different?
Route 1, I didn't travel that much. We traveled 27 all the time. So Route 1, I don't remember that much, other than there was a playmate that I had that lived on Route 1. Actually, she lived on Route 1, but she came to the Kingston School. And the only way I got to see her was to cut through the middle of the nursery, Princeton Nursery. I could walk through the nursery to get to her house.
Okay.
To play with her. And Route 1, I don't remember that much about it, although one of my dad's jobs was also driving a school bus.
Okay.
So sometimes he'd pick me up in the morning and I'd ride along with him.
You get a little tour.
And I would get the tour over to Monmouth Junction or Dayton, as he would pick up kids and drop them off from one place to the other.
That sounds like fun.
It was for me.
Yeah, no, it does. So, But you were saying, so your father drove a school bus, but how did you get to your school?
He dropped me off.
Oh, he just, okay, so it was part of the route.
Because the
Okay.
school bus was run by Ben Stewart. Ben Stewart had the garage, which is right across the street from the school.
Okay. That's
So
great.
when he'd bring the school bus back, he'd park the school bus and I'd run back across the street and go to school.
That's pretty good. It's pretty nice. So you mentioned before that you were a Methodist, so you went to a Methodist church. And
Right.
how did you normally get there? Was it within walking distance, or did you?
Usually, my parents always had a car.
Okay.
And
Do you remember anything about the car?
had a running board.
It had a running board. Okay, could have been from the 40s then, right?
Oh, yeah. My dad always had a car.
Okay.
He was a mechanic.
So they always work too.
Oh, yeah, and they always worked.
That's great. Do you have any special friends or teachers that you have fond memories of from your school days?
From Kingston,
Mm-hmm.
kindergarten teacher, Miss Marchese.
Okay. So, where did your parents do their shopping for groceries and clothes? I mean, you're right by Princeton, so did they go into Princeton or somewhere else?
I don't remember shopping in Princeton. I'll again have to say I'm not too sure. I remember my mom driving down to pick up my grandmom, driving down to Franklin, pick up my grandmom in Middlebush, to take her into New Brunswick to shop. And that's really the only shopping I remember doing. I remember walking up because at that time there was a store up on 27 which had, it was like that year's version of what a Quick Check would be today.
Okay.
You know,
Almost like a general store.
like a general
yeah,
store.
Yeah.
And she would pick up some stuff there, but I really don't remember, because back then you raised most of what you wanted, your vegetables. You bought fresh stuff from farm stores. You canned. My grandparents raised chickens, so we always had chicken. And I honestly don't remember actually shopping any place other than New Brunswick.
New Brunswick. Yeah, but we didn't do as much shopping as they do today,
No,
as we
no,
do today.
No.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And my mom made most of my clothes too.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
She.
So she had the sewing machine and the
Oh, yeah.
patterns and everything.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I still have her sewing machine.
Yeah.
When she had it, was one of those old-fashioned. You'd pedal it with
The
your
foot
feet.
pedals. Yeah.
Foot pedals.
The old singers.
Old Singer.
Yeah.
And my dad converted it and put a motor onto it for her.
I have the
And-
same thing in my basement from my grandmother.
Yeah. And I still have that converted machine. It quit on me one time, and I lugged it to a Singer repair place to get it fixed. And I had to laugh because it's heavy as lead, you know. And when I finally got it into the place, the guy looked at me and he says, "What kind of sewing do you do?" And I said, "Straight up and down, nothing fancy, no buttonholes, nothing, you know, nothing elaborate." And he says, "Well," he said, "I can fix this for you, and it'll cost you this much. Or you can buy one of the fancy-dancy ones, and that'll cost you that much. But if you're only going to do straight up and down sewing, fix this one, because this will sew trees together. And the other ones will always break."
So you got it fixed.
I got it fixed. Still use it.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Still works.
Wow, that's something. That's something. It's a good story. So you went to New Brunswick. Did you ever? Trenton's farther than New Brunswick. So did you end up going to Trenton?
We wound up moving. We left Kingston area during World War II because my father got a job working for the Army as a civilian employee,
Okay.
and it was easier to commute back and forth. So we moved closer to Hamilton Township, so he
Okay.
wouldn't have to commute so far.
Okay, so he worked in